At the end of 2002, Teri Hatcher left New York and actor John Tenney, her husband of 8 years, and moved back to Los Angeles to find work. But when she got there and settled into a small house with her 4-year-old daughter, she found there was very little work to be had.
When you start getting into your mid-30s for actresses, it tends to be tougher. There's not as many roles. Fact, there's just not as many roles, and there's a lot more people competing for those same roles.
Teri Hatcher is 39 and probably at the low point of her career. Her marriage has broken up. She hasn't had any success in the last couple of years that you can point to. It's a time of self-doubt.
And as the weeks and then months went by without her getting work, she became more and more demoralized.
Taking off 5 years in Hollywood for an actress is pretty much a death sentence, normally. You know, people forget about you.
Teri describes a story where she's laying on her kitchen floor, curled up in a ball.
I call it the kitchen floor phase, you know, when that was about where I spent most of my time, crying and feeling like I could never see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Then, in the spring of 2003, she was called in to audition for a role on a sitcom in development at ABC.
ABC calls her in to test for a sitcom. And she's very excited and she's nervous and she goes in and she has what she thinks is a very good audition.
But the execs at ABC thought otherwise.
She heard afterwards that some of the executives in the room didn't like her attitude, that they thought that she was arrogant.
Teri was devastated.
Not because she didn't get the part, but devastated that they would think that or that she had given off that impression.
You have to be emotionally sensitive and to be an actress, to be a good actress. And you can't help but feel things really deeply when disappointments come.
But Teri was also determined to patch things up with ABC.
Teri felt so bad about the audition that she sends cookies to everybody at ABC that she auditioned for with a note that says, I don't know what your perception was of that meeting, but I was very grateful for the opportunity to audition.
All you can really do at the end of the day is be who you are and try to show up every day being who you are.
The next day, Teri was called in to audition for a role on another ABC series. The character was a single mother named Susan Meyer, and the show was called Desperate Housewives. It had already been turned down by 3 other networks.
Desperate Housewives was a show that had to scratch and claw its way onto the schedule. A lot of people had to be convinced that this was going to be worth doing.
This is one of those stories where the producer goes out and pitches to everybody and nobody wants it.
Teri was well aware of the long odds of the show getting on the air, but she also knew what a great role Susan Meyer would be for her.
For Teri Hatcher, Desperate Housewives was a second chance, was the chance that almost no actress even expects to get at this point.
Teri had really hit a wall. It was sort of like you got to prove yourself all over again. It was almost like starting at square one. And then this thing comes along, and it means a lot to her, obviously, because she reads for it, she pushes for it, she's persistent.
I go back to the first reaction I had when I first read it, which was just, it was the best thing I'd read in 5 years. And it made me laugh, and it made me cry, and it just felt so relatable to my life.
And for this audition, she took no chances on being perceived as arrogant.
So she goes into the audition in jeans, a t-shirt, no makeup, not glamorous at all, because she's determined to show them who she really is. She doesn't want this false perception of her.
The rest, of course, is history. Teri got the part, and Desperate Housewives became not only a huge hit, but a cultural phenomenon.
I sort of have ended up just calling it a really fresh, entertaining television show. It's a story about relationships between the women in this neighborhood, between their spouses, and everything that is good and also everything that goes awry.
This could have just as easily been a pilot that never made it to series, could have been canceled 6 episodes. It all fell into place, and suddenly there's Teri Hatcher at the center again of popular culture and at the center of the Hollywood world.
It was sort of this new thing on television, this ensemble cast of women, and it just reached this cult status. It had followers, everyone was talking about it at work the next day. It was the buzzworthy TV show for several years. Teri sort of stands out on primetime TV because her and the other women of Desperate Housewives sort of ushered in this women over 40, sexy women sex appeal.
There was no doubt that the role of Susan had launched Teri back to the very top of the TV game.
But life at the top came with its own set of challenges.
Any TV actress that's on an hour show, that's an incredible amount of work. I don't think people realize how much you actually film when you produce an hour of television a week for 24 weeks in a year. That's just, they're basically locked down for 9 months. And her schedule between the show, being a mom, doing the publicity, and in fact, at the time that the show hit, she was actually her own publicist too. So she was managing it all.
As Susan Meyer, the role that made her a favorite with both fans and critics.
Her character was very much alive and bubbly and effervescent and had a lot more physical humor than probably all of the others.
She really doesn't take herself that seriously, and I think that's a real asset if you want to do comedy. You really certainly can't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself. And Teri, as elegant as she is, there's also a silliness about her.
I think what made Teri right for Desperate Housewives was the fact that she had this sort of scattered vulnerability. It fit in pretty with sort of all the chaos and craziness unfolding around her on the show. She wasn't this assured, full of herself person, but someone who was always angst-riddled. And I feel like that's probably, in some ways, the real Teri Hatcher, too.
At the end of the first season, Teri found herself on the list of Golden Globe nominees.
It was really exciting for her to go as a nominee that soon after the show had started. And I just remember we were up at the house, the group of us that was getting her ready, and it was a lovely afternoon.
And the evening got even lovelier. She won the Golden Globe for Best Performing Actress in a Comedy TV Series.
Teri's winning the Golden Globe in 2005 for Desperate Housewives was great for her, I'm sure good for her ego. It's sort of like the girl that played the dancing mermaid on Love Boat. Look at me now, I'm actually winning national awards. And that was a breakthrough in its way for her to have that endorsement of Hollywood.
She didn't have a specific speech, but she was pretty funny and real in what she said, and that's pretty much her too. She was, as she put it in her Golden Globe speech, Hollywood's biggest has-been.
Against the odds, Teri Hatcher was back on top. But she would soon come face to face with a horrible incident from her past, and she'd have to make a very difficult decision.